The views and content expressed on the Pop Culture Courtroom are provided solely for educational and entertainment purposes and do not constitute legal advice. For any legal matters, please consult with a licensed attorney.
Welcome to the Pop Culture Courtroom. I'm Matt Hardin.
And I'm William Mayfield.
This is our new podcast where we talk about whether or not there are court cases based on what happens in pop culture, things such as movies, TV, and books.
We're going to try to have a little bit of fun with it. As you see, we have a prop already. I'm wearing Happy Gilmore's hockey jersey from the movie. And with each podcast, we're going to add to our shelf here a little bit.
So we're going to give you a little bit of the legal perspective of what happens in these pop culture issues. And at the end of it, we'll decide whether or not there's a case or no case. Today's film is going to be Happy Gilmore.
So Happy Gilmore is a movie about a hockey player who falls on some hard times, as does his grandmother, and his grandmother's house is actually getting foreclosed upon. And along the way, he figures out that he's actually really good at golf and tries to use that as a way to raise money to get his grandmother's house back. And there's actually a pretty funny incident of how he learns that he's good at golf, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and Matt's going to talk about that a little bit.
Well, I love Adam Sandler. He's brought so much joy. He's a great comedian. Love his movies. It's a lot of fun. This particular movie, Happy Gilmore, I've seen a bunch. I know William has too. William is actually a former college golfer and knows a lot about golf, and I'm more new to the game. William brought me to it, and I've become a wildly mediocre golfer.
We're getting there, though. We're working on it.
We're working on it. Anyways, the scene sets up where Happy Gilmore's grandmother's house has been foreclosed on due to tax evasion. And the movers find a ancient set of Happy Gilmore's grandfather's golf clubs. One of them comes out, tries to hit a club in a very bad way. Ball goes a little bit. Happy makes fun of him. And they make a bet, I think, at that point. Can he hit it farther than them? And they'll go back to work.
You hit a ball past my ball, and we'll go straight back to work so you can watch your precious hockey game.
Give me the stupid club.
Happy goes up. He's got his famous golf shot he does where he takes a step into it, and he's able to drive the ball really, really far. In this first scene, it's close to 400 yards. He breaks a window in a house that's way down the street from where his grandmother's house is. Movers end up saying they bet him $20 he can't do it again.
$20 says you can't do it again.
Bring it on.
Well, it's that second one where we start having whether or not there's a court case. In the second one, he hits the homeowner that's standing in the yard in the head, knocks him over. That creates likely an injury for that homeowner. And at that point, they bet him double or nothing. The moving company does, whether or not he can do it again, and they'll go back to work immediately.
One more time, double or nothing.
At that point, does he hit another person?
I believe, yes. He hits the person from the top window and she falls down. That obviously would create an injury. The guy after that is like, you're going to have to pay for this, which is interesting, thinking about what we're doing here. And someone's going to have to pay for it, and that's what we're here to figure out. Now we've got two victims, and their property's been damaged as well. Personal injury claims are based on negligence, and that negligence has four elements that we're going to talk about today. Those are, in short, duty, breach, causation, and damages. Did the person that did something to another person have a duty to them? In this case, yes. They have a duty to not hit golf balls at people. It's pretty simple. Did they breach that duty? They did. Were they the cause of it? That we're going to get into that a little bit. We know Happy was, but was the moving company the cause? And the fourth one is really important. Were there damages that resulted from this? And we just talked about that. There clearly were. Someone fell off of a second story of a house and likely got hurt and likely had medical bills.
Well, I'll say one extra thing. Causation's actually broken up into legal cause and causation in fact. And so probably the best way to understand the difference in those is, but for this happening, would the person have had the incident? Was the extra causation that I'd throw in there.
And I think that'll be really important when we analyze whether or not the moving company has liability in this. So I'll admit that when I first started analyzing this, I really didn't think that the moving company had a lot of liability. But as I went further on in my analysis, that changed. What were your initial thoughts, Matt?
Well, Happy has no idea from the start that he can hit a ball that far. He's doing it just so they'll get to work so he can go watch a hockey game, essentially. After the first time, he does have knowledge of it, and he hits all three of those balls really far, really straight into the neighbors. And I think it's important to talk about one other legal aspect that we have here in Tennessee and is in a lot of other states, which is called comparative fault. And comparative fault essentially means that more than one person can be at fault for an injury. And here, it is likely that the moving company would have fault and that Happy Gilmore would have fault. But what do I think a jury's going to do with that? Well, as we go through the rest of the movie, Happy Gilmore becomes a very famous, beloved golfer on the golf tour. Who, if this goes to trial, is a jury going to want to blame? The moving company or the famous, irreverent golfer?
And that's a good point, and something that I thought about early on too. Clearly, Happy early on in the movie is having financial struggles. He can't save his grandmother's house. We often hear the term sometimes in the legal world, judgment proof, meaning someone may owe someone money, but they may not be capable of paying that. So that's an issue as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, Happy throughout the movie does things that could lead to other types of liability. I mean, his first golf tournament ever at the Waterbury Open, he punches a spectator in the face for making fun of him for having too many putts. Not only is that a crime, but there would probably be an injury case just out of that.
No question. And then after the PGA Tour learned that was a significant possibility, they could be facing some problems on down the line as well. I think you brought up a good point earlier, and I think it applies to the moving company as well, is that the first ball that Happy Gilmore hit, to me, doesn't yet have liability because the moving company didn't believe that he could hit the ball out of the yard. And he didn't believe he could hit the ball out of the yard. He's clearly never played golf before. It's a big plot point in the movie. He is not identified as a golfer. He is a hockey player, and he will tell you that till you're blue in the face. And he just saw these guys who claim they've played some golf hit it like 5 yards, and it didn't even get out of the yard. So why would he think he would do better than them? But once he strikes that first drive, which presumably goes around 400 yards, everyone is put on notice that this is a dangerous activity.
I think that's right. And at that point, that's where the moving company starts having liability, because typically you're going to be responsible for what your employees do in the furtherance of what their employment is with you. And here they're moving these clubs out. As a golfer, what did you think about that set of Happy Gilmore's grandfather's clubs?
I'm a good player, but I'm not known for hitting the ball really far. It's super impressive to me that he hit the ball as far as he did, but the fact that he could do it with those wooden clubs was unbelievable. I think Rory McIlroy and Bryson DeChambeau were trying that earlier this year, and they couldn't hit it anywhere close to as far with those clubs as they did with their own clubs.
So Grandpa likely had some persimmon woods or something that they're doing. And how many, I don't remember there being a whole lot of clubs in there yet. Happy never really adds to that throughout the season other than when he gets the specially made putter later.
There's definitely some flaws in the movie from a golf perspective, but I think they leave those in for comedic effect. One thing you talked about earlier that I kind of want to talk about is but for, and I thought that was really important in this. As we talked about earlier, Happy's not a golfer. He doesn't want to be playing golf. The moving company, once they see that he has hit this long shot, goes, $20, you can't do it again. There's no reason to believe that Happy Gilmore would have hit another ball but for that bet, but for them enticing him to do it. So that's really where I think they start to come into play in terms of liability.
I think it's pretty questionable that Happy had the $20 to pay the bet.
No question. And it's also really clear that Happy's not an employee in any way of the company, because he threw the guy who was heading up the foreclosure through the window of his grandmother's front door, which is probably somewhere else he has some liability.
There's something I always wondered about with it. Happy ends up with these golf clubs later. And they're basically, the IRS is, foreclosing on his grandmother's house, taking the stuff to sell all her things. I wondered if he forgave the bet for keeping the clubs.
Well, he certainly thinks highly of the golf clubs, because at some point in the movie, when his caddy comes up to take his clubs to carry them around for him, he thinks they're being stolen and punches the caddy. And he says, be careful with those. Those are antiques, once he realizes what's going on.
I believe you're talking about young Will Zalatoris.
He does look, he has a striking resemblance to PGA Tour pro Will Zalatoris.
Ultimately, any other legal aspects of this for our evaluation we need to talk about?
No, I think that obviously both parties are on the hook for this. The but-for analysis that you're talking about, this wouldn't have happened but for Happy Gilmore. He hit the ball, and he had knowledge that it was something that could cause damage, and did cause damage and continue to do it, but it wouldn't have happened but for the moving company continuing to bet him and enticing him to do it.
Well, let's get down to the brass tacks then. Case or no case?
I'd say absolutely a case. I think the question here is, when we're assigning fault, what percentage of fault would go on Mr. Gilmore and what percentage would go on the moving company? And I'll let you answer first.
Well, I think there's a case also. Here, I agree with you. If I'm pushing this case forward as a plaintiff attorney, I put everything I got on that moving company. Happy Gilmore's a famous person. He's likable. I could see where a lawyer might think, oh, that's the deep pocket I can go after. But I think that would backfire on you. If I'm in the defense side, if you are defending the moving company, you're going to be wanting to point the finger at Happy. If you're defending Happy, you're going to point the finger at the moving company. Well, if you get on the side of Happy's lawyer and you're both pointing the finger at the moving company, I think it's more powerful to a jury to potentially award money, and they're not going to want to punish a likable celebrity. That's just the way of the world.
I certainly agree with you that would be the correct strategy, because even by the end of the movie, Happy is unable to save his grandmother's house naturally, which I think was for less than $300,000, if I recall. So the moving company, in theory, probably at least has an insurance policy that's higher than that. So I agree with the strategy. I'm not 100% sure, though, that I agree that we can get past the fact that Happy struck the golf shot. And that's the tough part, is at the end of the day, if you think about it in a traffic sense, if someone waves you out onto a street, they have liability for that. But ultimately, the person who made the decision to make the bad turn is the driver. So I actually think a jury would hit Happy with a little bit more of the fault, but all juries are different. And I certainly think it could go either way.
Well, another interesting question about that is that I thought of as we're discussing this is, would they sue Grandma? I mean, this happens on her property. At this point, she's already moved into the old folks' home, making quilts for Ben Stiller's character. Clearly doesn't have any money, or she wouldn't have had to sell the house either. And that's an elderly, likable lady. Also would be a second person you'd have to worry about the jury not wanting to punish.
Yeah, I agree with you on both of those. I mean, she certainly is struggling financially. She hadn't paid taxes in 20 years or something like that. Her house is being taken away from her. She's probably past a point where she's going to take a job and make more money. Unfortunately, Ben Stiller's character is making her work for free, probably illegally, and maybe she could get some money through that lawsuit.
That's just craft time.
But plus her fingers are hurting.
Well, I will say one part that I did think of with that was did she have homeowners insurance, and would that particular policy cover something like this that her grandson's doing for fun out in her yard? Probably not.
I don't think so. Again, the general thinking would be maybe it's worth a shot, but I think you run into the issues that you talked about. She's a really friendly lady, and she actually didn't do anything wrong.
So your homeowners policies that you can get with your houses, it's a contract, and that essentially means the different insurance companies can put specifically what it's covers. So to see whether or not Grandma's coverage, if she had any, given that she's a tax evader, I would suspect she doesn't, would actually cover. It's going to depend just on the language of what it was they say they'll cover in it.
So some things I was thinking about as a personal injury attorney. The movie takes place presumably over one summer. So we certainly maybe didn't see the conclusion of this, right? Like in Tennessee, our statute of limitations to bring a case like this would be 1 year, which is really short. I actually don't know what state Happy Gilmore took place in. I don't think that, well, it took place in various states, but I don't know where this scene took place in.
Is Waterbury a real place? Is that Connecticut?
I mean, that has to be a golf course. I just don't know where it is, but it would be interesting to see, in theory, if it's possible in an alternate world that someone did bring suit against Happy Gilmore when he had some more funds, and maybe that's something we'll see in Happy Gilmore too.
I think all implications are that he lives somewhere in the New England area.
That's what I was thinking as well. Of course, he starts, he has a tournament in Portland. He has tournaments all over the place. But what would be important for this analysis is where was Grandma's house, because that's where all this happened.
Yeah, so it'd be the law of that particular state. We are, of course, giving our opinions based on what happened likely in Tennessee or Kentucky where we practice law.
Correct. So I think we mostly agree on this one, but there will be ones down the line where we don't, and that'll be pretty fun for you guys to see, I think.
Yep, and we're going to add one segment to this that we're going to do on each one that we call irrelevant evidence. That means something that we think will be fun to talk about that has nothing to do whether or not there's a case or not. So for this first one, the irrelevant evidence is going to be the top 5 athletic achievements of Adam Sandler within his movies.
So I'm going to start, and I'm going to talk about, we'll keep it on Happy Gilmore because we just talked about it. Happy Gilmore on his second hole as a professional golfer makes a hole-in-one on a par 4. And that's an incredible achievement. As Matt talked about, I played college golf. And what's interesting from my perspective is, as great as that achievement was, someone who hits the ball as far as he does has the possibility of doing that. But what would have been tough for me is that Happy got off to a really bad start in that tournament. He amazingly hits the ball onto the green on a par 4 that is presumably around 400 yards, but if you look at the flyover, is comedically probably 800 yards. But then he takes 5 putts to make the putt, and that's a double bogey, and that's a really, really bad start for a professional golfer. He rebounded the next hole with a hole-in-one on a par 4, which would get him to 1 under, which is a more typical score for a golfer. But I think what probably helped him is he was so ignorant to golf that he didn't even know that he had started poorly, so he wasn't in a bad mindset to play the second hole.
Well, not only that, not only is it a hole-in-one on a par 4, for those of you who don't golf, that's called an albatross, where you are 3 under par. An albatross, way harder to get than a hole-in-one because of the distances involved.
Absolutely. I've been fortunate enough to have 2 hole-in-ones in my life, but I have not had an albatross. Last summer, I hit one to within 2 inches for what would have been an albatross, but I'm still waiting on my first one.
Well, and I've definitely had an albatross on a putt-putt course.
Which is not particularly easy either.
All right, we'll stick with number 2 from Happy Gilmore. We'll go over that quickly. I don't think anybody who's seen the end of this movie with how Happy wins his first tour championship in his gold jacket, where the scaffolding has come down and he has to hit the putt over that, which mimics, frankly, what a putt-putt course would be like, and nails it. Wouldn't think that was a phenomenal achievement for him to get a birdie on that hole.
It's an incredible achievement. In reality, it's been a big topic lately. Tour players get relief if there is a man-made object in their line of sight and could affect the golf ball. I've never seen a bigger example in my life than this tower collapsing and being directly in the middle of his line. Pretty frequently, recently in the tournament this year, Robert McIntyre took this type of relief, and a few other guys have taken this type of relief, and it can be controversial because it sometimes feels like an excuse. This was not an excuse. In reality, they would have cleared this. He would have putted the next day, but his achievement certainly defied the laws of physics and science in every way.
All right, our third one on this list is going to be from the movie Grown Ups, a very rewatchable movie. It's fun to watch, and it's essentially about Adam Sandler grows up in this town, ends up being a LA agent, and they're coming back for the funeral of their junior high basketball coach. And that junior high basketball coach led that team to a championship, the only championship of his career, and a team that features a 5'3" Rob Snyder and a 5'7" David Spade.
Yeah, 5'3" and 5'6". It's hard to find in modern day basketball to find a spot for really anybody that's much less than 6 feet, but it would certainly be difficult to have those 2 guys on one team and win even a game, much less a championship.
Well, and Adam Sandler has this shot where he hits a bank shot on what normally would be a distance for a jump shot, and he hits it over and over again throughout the movie. That's how he wins the championship, and they talk about how he never misses it, and that's unless he can do something to make somebody feel a little better about themselves.
You know, that one's actually a lot more realistic than the golf situation, because I've seen clips of Adam Sandler playing basketball, and he's really not bad, and he likes to play with actual NBA players from time to time, and he's in his 50s now, but he can still play.
Yeah, and he's been in a lot more sports movies than you would think. Not only the comedies, but some of these newer ones that he's been in.
So for the next one, I'm actually going to go back to a much older one, though. And this is kind of along the same lines of Happy Gilmore. It's The Water Boy. It's like in Happy Gilmore. It's a situation where he had no idea that he had any skill at a particular sport, but then he learns that he's a tremendous football player. And he does lots of things in that movie, but what I'm going to talk about is a play that amazed me and also sent me on a little bit of a fun rabbit hole. He inhibits a field goal. And I don't necessarily say block, because he goes through the line, he takes out the left guard, and the kick is kicked. And as it's going up, he grabs it and holds on to it and runs the other way. It's an incredible feat, probably not something that's been done on camera, because that kick would be going so hard it would generally bounce off of someone. But it led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Him catching that ball was really important, because if the ball is blocked behind the line of scrimmage, the offense can actually still pick it up and advance it and score. So the defense really needs to make sure and get on top of that ball. Well, when he grabbed it and held on to it, they didn't have to do that and risk that at all. And that's a rule that I think a lot of people, including myself, didn't know in football.
Well, not only that, but on the way to catching that ball, he mauls the left guard. I think I would love to see Bobby Boucher playing some linebacker for the Vols this fall.
Just win, baby.
Just win, baby. Well, our last one's also going to be from the Water Boy, because I think it would be remiss not to talk about what Bobby Boucher calls using his tackling fuel to block and tackle people based on people that have not thought enough of him growing up, bullied him. And there are a ton of remarkable tackles and blocks in this, including the one that I would also put on this list, which is where he's the lead blocker. They are running the ball down the field, and he clocks 3 different people. Unbelievably good hits. SEC quality hits, I call them.
And I think that was really illustrative of what they did with that character, because he didn't grow up playing football. He didn't dream of playing any specific position. He just did whatever his team needed to do. And at first, that was getting them water. And then afterwards, that was blocking. It was blocking kicks. It was throwing passes. It was catching passes. He was kind of the ultimate team guy who finally got his chance to shine, and it was really, really cool to see.
Well, one of the things I've always loved about Adam Sandler is a lot of these movies is he's playing an outsider or a misfit of some type, and he finds success in the movies in his life by being true to himself and relying on his friends and family, which is, a nice thing in the world.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for joining us for our first podcast of the Pop Culture Courtroom. We look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thanks, guys.
The Pop Culture Courtroom is, as always, sponsored by Matt Hardin Law. We are a personal injury law firm who practices throughout Tennessee and Kentucky. If you have an issue such as a car wreck or other injury that you need a lawyer's help with, please give us a call or take a look at our website, and we'll follow up with you. Our website can be found at matthardinlaw.com or call 1-800-777-MATT.